Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm so excited because I'm doing the final get ready with me using this Tom Ford quad. Now this is the all matte one called the Smoky Quartz. Has these beautiful warmer tone neutral shades, again, that are all matte. And I am doing this in a get ready with me style. And I thought it would be really useful if I also ranked these palettes because I did try out all three of them. And these shades, they all came out together. On the site, they looked like they would be extremely similar, but they are definitely way different than the photos on Sephora showed or any other online retailers. They're definitely very different, and I do have a preference, and I do have a ranking on all of them. So I just thought that would be helpful if I ranked them all from my favorite to least favorite in the end of this video. So I do hope this helped you out. I hope all these get ready with me's and full reviews did help you out as well. So just reading a little bit about this quad in particular. So again, this is the Smoky Quartz and this is Tom Ford's new Creme eyeshadow quad. So the Smoky Quartz contains a neutral quad in all matte finishes of a neutral beige, a dusty nude, a mid-tone terracotta, and a deep brown. And of course, I will insert some swatches for you. So those are all the shades in the Smoky Quartz palette. And now I was interested in trying this one out because I think it is very useful for everyone to have a completely neutral matte eyeshadow quad or eyeshadow palette in their collection, just because mattes is something that you probably use on a daily basis. And a completely matte palette can be just hard to come about because they're a little harder to formulate. They can be a little more finicky, a little harder to blend. You have a lot more of an ease of application when you're using shimmer shades just because they tend to blend into each other a little bit more easier. So I was very interested to try this out to see if it will compare to some of my other favorite matte formulations. So if you want to see my full review, get ready with me, and thoughts on the new Smoky Quartz palette, just stay tuned. So this is the Smoky Quartz that I will be using today, and you may be wondering why this shade looks a little odd. So my palette it wasn't broken because these shadows are not a typical powder formula where they will break. It came out of the pan, and because it's such a creamy formula and so soft, I actually had a really hard time getting it back into the pan because it's just so creamy that it's just hard to pick up. But because these shades are so creamy, you can actually reform it. So now it is sitting in the pan a little bit better, but it's definitely not perfect. So these are just extremely emollient and extremely creamy. But the benefits to something like this that kind of has that putty feeling to it is that you can mold it back together if it does happen to crumple or break, especially if you are using quite a lot of the eyeshadows. Sometimes when you get to the end of an eyeshadow palette, it just all kind of crumples and then you have to get rid of it. But with this, you will be able to kind of mold it back together. So I guess that's one benefit. So I'm going to start out with this lightest shade in the palette here. This is like the most cool tone in the palette, sorry. And I'm going to take a Sonia G Blender Pro. So I have said this isn't the best product to apply creamy shadows, but I do want to use a brush that I would typically apply my normal eyeshadows with, because if I was a normal consumer and I just bought this palette without having any knowledge that this is a cream to powder formula, I would still reach for this brush. So I just want to see if this brush will work with this eyeshadow. So I'm just going to start in the outer corner and I am going to try and build it up. So I definitely do get pigmentation there. This is better than the Rose Topaz quad where I was getting virtually no color payoff with that shade. I am getting a little bit, but definitely it's not super pigmented when I apply it with this brush. And so with this step, I'm just going on the outer corner because I am using this as a transition shade and then taking that excess product that remains on the brush and just blending it back and forth into the crease. You know what, I actually think this is applying fairly nice. You do have to kind of dip back into these shades if you are using a brush like this, but I don't mind that because it just is really beautifully blended. It looks very blurred, super easy to work with. Like I said, this formula, it really blends like a dream. But just to see the pigmentation I can get with a denser brush, this is a Wayne Goss 18 brush. I am going to just pick up that transition shade again, and I'm just going to stamp that on the outside corner, and then again, just work it into the crease. If you do want more pigmentation initially, I would use a denser brush. But if you want a really beautifully buffed out and just like blurred look, I do think you could still use these typical blending brushes. It worked fine for me. And then next I'm going to take this second shade in the palette. I'm going to stick with this Wayne Goss 18 brush. And I'm going to pick up that product on the side of the brush because I'm almost going to use this as I would a flat shader brush. I'm going to just apply this shade onto the lid, and I'm going from the inside corner outwards. And this is really lovely color. It's warm, but it's not too orangey or anything like that. I actually think this palette, it looks really earthy, and it is neutral, but it definitely leans on the warmer side. But I just think these shades are very flattering. And then when some of that product has kind of dispersed, I'm going to start working it upwards into the crease to meet up with that transition shade so that everything is blended really nicely and beautifully. Wow, for a matte eyeshadow, this blends so nice and it applies so evenly on the lid and very smoothly. I am really, really impressed with how this is looking. So now I'm going to take this shade right here. Now this is a little deeper than the previous shade. It's a little more of a rusty shade. It has a little more red to it and it is deeper. But the tones, they do look similar in the pan, but now that I'm applying this onto the eye, they do apply differently. This is definitely deeper in tone. So it adds some nice depth. And I am just basically, again, I'm taking that color on the side of the brush and I'm just patting that onto the outside corner because I pretty much just want this to be on the outside corner. And again, just patting that on, and it basically just blends seamlessly into the other shade. That didn't require like any blending at all. And then I'm just going to work in the outer crease. So I'm very carefully just bringing that shade just into the outer crease where I want a little more depth there, but nothing too dramatic. And then finally, I'm going to take the deepest shade here, and I'm going to take it on a flat definer brush. And I'm just going to use that as my eyeliner. So taking this across the upper lash line. And I work from the outside corner where I want the most pigmentation and then blending it inwards. And this doesn't need to be super precise because I just want this to kind of be a smoky liner. For the lower lash line, I'm just going to take a pencil brush and this shade that I used on the lid, and I'm going to blend that across the lower lash line. Just from the outside corner, making sure to connect it to the outer corner on the top lid. And then I'm just going to add a tiny bit of this deeper rusty tone. And I'm just going to apply that right on the outer corner of the lash line. I'm not going to bring it towards the inner corner at all. Normally on an everyday basis, I would apply a shimmer shadow, but because I want to show this palette in action, I'm just going to leave the eyes here and I'm just going to apply mascara and I'll be back. Mascara is on and I went in with my usual Dior 3D Lash Primer and then the Kjaer Weis Impossible Mascara. Now I will go over my thoughts on the palette at the end, obviously, for my final thoughts, but I am going to move on to the face. And for concealer, I'm just, again, this is right here, I'm going to take the Sisley Phyto-Éclat Eye Concealer with Botanical Extracts. This is the shade 2. So again, I like to apply concealer before foundation just because I feel like everything blends together more smoothly when I do it this way. So I'm just blending that concealer in with a damp Beauty Blender sponge. Now I did want to go in with that higher coverage concealer today because I am wearing those red tones on my eyes. And sometimes when you wear red tones on your eyes, it just kind of brings about the darkness in your under eyes a little more. It just makes it look, it almost contrasts with the darkness in your under eyes so you can just notice it. So I just thought going in with a higher coverage concealer today would be the best for this look. So even with just the concealer on, I think that looks a lot better because you could really notice the blue in my under eyes. Now I was going to use the Chantecaille Future Skin Cushion, but I think because the eyes turned out a little smokier and sultry than what I initially anticipated, I'm going to go in with a lighter coverage foundation just because I really want my skin to show through. I like that contrast of having a more like dramatic eye with having very natural looking skin. So today I'm going to take the Chantecaille Future Skin Oil-Free Gel Foundation. I wear the shade Creme, and it comes in this little pot, and if you can see, I have used quite a lot of it. And I just like to take a little dollop of it, apply it to the palm of my hand, and then I will just work in that way. And this is just a super natural looking foundation. You can definitely still see your skin texture through this foundation. Like it's not going to cover up any intense hyperpigmentation or anything like that, but it is going to just alleviate any redness that you have on your skin, and it is going to blur and perfect my skin. But you still, like, you never look like you're wearing foundation when you wear this foundation. It's just so skin-like. This is one of my favorite in-person foundations because, like I said, you can't detect it sitting on the skin. And so when people see you in person, they're not going to be able to detect a bunch of makeup on your skin. It really is just your skin but better type of foundation, which I love. So I've just gone ahead and tight lined with my Sisley concealer. This is, again, the Phyto-Khol Star Waterproof in the shade 1 Matte Black. This is the best tight lining eyeliner. It does not transfer to the lower waterline. And I'm just going to touch up the lower lash line. I'm going to go back into this shade here. And just in case some of the concealer covered that shade up, I'm just going to lightly go back over top. And again, making sure to connect it to that outer corner on the top lid so it all flows together. Bronzer, I am going to use the Sisley Sun Glow. This is the bronzing gel to powder, and that's exactly what it is. This is a baked gelée formula, so it is that gel to powder texture. I thought it would go well with this look just because we are using that kind of cream to powder formula, that this is almost the same idea. It just really, these products just really melt into the skin. They're very buildable as well, so you can apply just a sheer amount of color. You do require a heavier hand with this baked gelée formula, especially the bronzer, just because, again, it goes on in such a sheer layer where it doesn't look too intense, but it's extremely buildable. And even though you can build up the product, it never looks cakey, it never looks heavy on the skin, it never looks powdery. It really retains that creaminess on the skin and just gives such a lovely sun-kissed glow. It also has a bit of a sheen to it, but there's no metallic particles. You're not going to see the shimmer sitting on your skin at all, and it just brings a beautiful warmth back to your skin. And I think because these tones are so sultry and a little more smoky, having that warmth to your skin is just going to be perfect for this look. It's just going to really suit it. For highlighter, I'm going to take one of my favorites. This is a Tom Ford Sheer Highlighting Duo in the shade Reflex Gilt. This is one of my favorite, actually permanent highlighters. So many highlighters that I love are limited edition, but this one is not. So I'm going to dip into this deeper shade here, and then I am going to, so basically I'm going to dip my brush in once in this deeper shade and then go mostly into that upper gold shade. Now this is a beautiful highlighter. Again, it is that baked gelée formula, which is just my favorite formula for highlighters as well, because they really do appear on the skin like a liquid highlighter would. And the beautiful thing about these is that after about 10 minutes, they just sort of infuse and meld into the skin, and you don't detect that highlighter sitting on top of your skin, so it just makes your cheekbones glow in such a flattering way. And this formula is extremely finely milled, so it's very flattering on the skin. It just gives such a beautiful, fresh, and glowing luminosity that is just very beautiful. It's never overdone. And then I'm going to stick with the Tom Ford theme, and I'm going to take the shade and Illuminate blush. This is the duo in the shade number 05 Sun Drunk. This one I would say is probably the most neutral though. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip into this shade first, like a few times, and then I'm going to go over top with that lighter peach shade. And I'm just going to blend that excess back on the back of my hand and then apply to the skin. And this also has a really unique formula where it gives a lot of great color payoff, but it doesn't look powdery on the skin at all. It really reminds me kind of the eyeshadows where it does really just infuse into the skin. It never looks powdery on the skin. It does this great job of just blending and melting into the skin. So I really like this shade because it gives me back color to my skin, and I think it's a really youthful color. It looks really pretty on the skin. It just gives my skin that glow back, but it doesn't look too intense or anything like that. And just to add that final blurring effect to the skin, I'm going to take my Clé de Peau Refining Pressed Powder on a Sonia G. This is a Face Pro brush. And then I like to just go over this area right here where I want everything to look extra blurred and filtered. And then I usually take the excess just to the center of my face and to the center of my nose. For lips, I think I just want to go with something pretty nude because I think, again, it will go well with these smoky eyes. Gonna take the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk lip liner, and I'm just going to line my lips. I am going to take an actual lipstick today. This is the Chanel Rouge Cocoa in the shade number 402 Adrian. So this is just a perfect nude shade. It's a perfect combination of like peach, brown, and pink. And I'm not going to apply it from the tube on my lips because I don't want that much color payoff. So I'm just going to take my finger and get a little bit of that pigment onto my fingertip. And then I'm going to use this to pat that color onto my lips, just so I don't get so much opacity on my lips where it's just going to look too intense. I'm going to get a little bit of that color payoff, but it's going to be much more subdued using my fingers to apply it. I think that is the perfect color for this look, but I always like a little bit of gloss. So I'm going to, again, going back to the Tom Ford, this is in my top 3 favorite lip glosses of all time. This is the Brilliant Gloss in the shade number 21 in the Buff. This is just such a luxurious formula. The texture is so thin and beautiful. Oh, and it smells lovely as well. It's just, it feels amazing when you apply it. I know that sounds like dramatic for a lip gloss, but it really does feel ultra comfortable. It is such a thin texture. It gives you a bit of sheen, but again, you're not going to feel any of that shimmer particles or anything. It just makes your lips look nice and subtly plump, and it just is, it's so smoothing. The formula is very, very lovely and gives you just a really nice shine. So that is it for the final look using the Smoky Quartz eyeshadow palette. So looking at this eyeshadow, I want to say I am extremely impressed, especially because this is a completely matte formula and I did not go in with any shimmer shades. This just, it melts into the eyes just beautifully, especially for a matte shadow that mattes can emphasize a little bit of texture, especially if you have any dryness on your eyes. This absolutely did not. It hasn't emphasized any fine lines or anything like that. It just blended like a dream and looks so creamy and just lovely on the eyes. I think it blended beautifully, especially again for more matte shades. Sometimes you can struggle a little bit with blending or you need to spend a little extra time blending. But I think these shades just look very, very lovely, very stunning, super easy to work with. I think they have enough depth to them that you can use all of these shades together and it doesn't blend and become muddy at all. I just thought this was a lovely formula. Now, for an everyday basis, I probably would use this palette in combination with something. So thinking like I would use this palette and either use it with the Tiger Eye palette because I think those two combined would be beautiful, or I'd go over top with like an eyeshadow topper, thinking like the Chantecaille Luminescent Eye Shade or the Chantecaille Mermaid Eye Color. But I am really happy with this formula. It's definitely a very interesting formula because if you feel them with your fingertips, or if, like I said, my shadow kind of separated a bit, you can meld them back. They feel very putty-like, which is very interesting. It's kind of odd because I've never had a eyeshadow product that has felt like that or worked in this way, but really lovely. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rank these palettes from and again, this is my opinion, what I think is best to worst, what I think is worth the money, and obviously going into the order of what I don't think is worth the money. So my favorite eyeshadow palette by far is the Tiger Eye palette. I think this palette just is my favorite eyeshadow palette. It's my perfect tones. I love all the shimmers in these because they have my perfect level of shimmer. It's not metallic, but it's not a barely there sheen. It's that right perfect in between, that kind of Goldilocks shimmer that I really enjoy. It's definitely more of that continuous shimmer. There is no chunky glitter particles or anything like that. There's no real separation of that glitter where you can feel that chunkiness. It's not super dry. It's a very emollient shimmer that just gives you a beautiful sheen, a beautiful glow, but is never over the top. This is a palette that I would be comfortable wearing on my work days. So I could wear this to work and not feel like I'm overdone, but I could also wear it on nights out and I could make it look a little more dramatic. And I just think this is the perfect any occasion eyeshadow palette. It's lovely, it's beautiful. I don't find that I need to pair this with another eyeshadow palette. I can use all these and get a beautiful look every single time. And I think this color story is perfect as well because it is really neutral, just leaning warm. So for me, that is my kind of perfect tone because cool tones just don't look the best on my coloring and my hair color. I like to lean a little bit warmer, and this just suits me so well, but it's not too warm that there's any orangey undertones or that it's red or anything, or it's gonna stand out so much. This is just beautifully neutral, and it's just, I really love the shades in this. I love the formula. It was so easy to work with. They blend like a dream. It almost requires no effort to blend. If you are a beginner, I would suggest this palette for you, and if you're advanced, I would suggest this palette for you. I just don't really have, I can't really find one complaint for this. This is lovely. I love this palette. Next up, I would suggest the Smoky Quartz. I really do love the formula of this. This is something, again, I would wear on a daily basis, but I would not wear it just as a matte eyeshadow palette. For me, I would have to pair this with a shimmer shade just because I like shimmers for an everyday basis or especially when I'm going out. So for me, I would just have to pair this palette with something else. But that's not a bad thing because I think it's just really beneficial to have a neutral palette in your collection that's matte because, again, it pairs well with anything. It pairs well with any shimmer. And these tones they're definitely on the warmer side, but they're not too warm. So for me, that works with, again, with my coloring because I have a warmer skin tone and warmer hair. So I do like that these are more warmer neutrals. And I just think the formula, again, it's beautiful. It's very easy to work with. It is very forgiving if you have dry eyes. I think this would be lovely if you have mature eyes. I think it would just sit over top of your eyes really lovely as well. And it's super easy to work with, even though it is a different formula than a typical powder eyeshadow. I am just so impressed with this palette. Do I think this is a must-have if you have a lot of neutral palettes in your collection? No, but I think this formula is very unique and just something that if you are looking for that perfect everyday neutral palette, this would be something to look at, especially if you gravitate towards more warmer neutrals. Now, in last place comes this is the Rose Topaz Quad, and I just don't love this palette. I tried playing with it again last night after I took my makeup off, just to see if I could get myself to like it a little more, but I just think the color story isn't perfect. I think this is too light to be a transition shade, and if I'm saying that and I'm a light to medium skin tone, if you have a deeper skin, you're not going to be able to use this as a transition shade, and it's also an awkward tone where you couldn't even use it as a brow highlight because it's such a salmon-y color, so it wouldn't really work as a highlight shade if you had a deeper complexion. I don't really know who this is going to work for, and then I think it's kind of awkward that this shade is super, super dark because you need like a mid-tone to blend these two shades together. And it's just weird that this one's so light and this one's so dark. It just doesn't meld in together as well as I would have hoped so. They needed to do like an in-between color here, but you can't really use this shimmer in the crease as well. You can only use this shimmer on your lid or as an inner corner highlight. And for me, this palette just feels a little bit incomplete. The color story just isn't my favorite. And unfortunately, for that reason, I can't even recommend this because I think you'll be disappointed with this shade in particular. And then this shade's just not that exciting. It's just like a champagne shimmer that like you can find in a lot of other eyeshadow palettes, even though I think the formula is really, really lovely. I just think this is the palette that I am least excited about in my honest opinion. And I'm just being totally upfront and transparent. And please don't be upset if this is your favorite palette because I'm just not really happy with this shade, and I think that's kind of a deal breaker when you're only getting 4 eyeshadows in a quad and one doesn't perform 100%. So that is just my thoughts. I initially thought I would love this one the best, so I'm really happy that I picked up all 3. But that is my ranking, and I really hope it helped you out. So that is it for today's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video and me reviewing all these palettes. Please let me know your favorite down below. Do you plan on picking any of these up? Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Like this video if you like it, and I'll see you in my next video.